in what should be a surprise to no one, we are casting a zinc Jedi symbol. And this thing is super tiny and super detailed. Luckily it's zinc, and zinc flows really well, so we're going to walk through the entire process. I'm dealing with molten metal. It's an electric furnace, so it doesn't have the whoosh the propane ones do. So it seems safer, but it's not. It's still using zinc, which is a lower melting temperature, lower melting metal. It's still molten metal. This is super dangerous. But if you take the right precautions, it's still dangerous, but it's less so. So keep in mind, everything we're doing today, this is molten metal. It's not resin. It's not, anything. It's not foam. This is molten metal. So the casting process I use is sand casting, where you take your positive, and you pack a bunch of sand around it. Then you take out your positive and you pour metal in the hole where the positive was. I am using a 3D printed resin piece. Let's see if we can get this to focus on this tiny little piece. Because why wouldn't I have made it just that small? So, zoom in a bit. There we go. This is the resin piece I want to cast. Lots of detail. I've added draft, which means it's angled, so the sand shouldn't catch. But I did make a bunch of different sized ones to see which one would work the best. Since I'm not quite sure, I figure it's always better to make a bunch of different ones and see what we get. There's all kinds of things you can download and do this with. I model all my own. I model all my stuff in Lightwave, export it as an OBJ, and then print it out. Just because I like making my own stuff. The sand I'm using, it's a oil-infused sand. It's like making sandcastles at the beach. You need a little bit of moisture in there for everything to lock in. And this uses oil instead of water. It tends to last a bit longer. This brand in particular is called Petrobond. Works really well. I've been doing this for a couple of years now. When we first started, we're like, well, every spring we'll get new sand. That's never happened. It's still the same sand we started with. Every now and again we'll get a bag of new stuff for facing sand. Other than that, it's pretty much the same sand. These are cope and drag. They're just metal flasks. Thank you. Jeez Louise. They're just metal flasks. They hold the sand in while I do all of this. I've got parting compound. The parting compound I use is Teton part. Works really well. I like it. I apply it with a chip brush, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to dust everything, prep everything, and we're going to ram up a mold real quick. So these flasks have prongs on one side and flat on the other. We want to go with the flat side and make sure this is pointing down. A lot of people pour these vertical, which makes this make a lot more sense. I don't. So it is what it is. So I'm going to cast 2 of these at once. I want them relatively close to each other. Yeah, it's fine. And then I coat both of them in parting compound. parting compound helps everything from sticking. It doesn't stop sticking, it just helps prevent it a bit. We were talking about facing sand a second ago. That's fresh sand that's just put through a wire mesh. This stuff is got super small particle size, which makes for the smaller the particle size, the more the detail you get. Once I have everything covered, I tend to go back to the older sand. There's nothing wrong with it. It's still super, not sticky, but sticky. It sticks to itself really well still. Gently push everything down. I have found that body weight is more than enough to compact this sand. A lot of people like hitting it with a hammer. I think most of that's for show. For the level of prop I make, just pressing it in like this is more than enough. Again, I'm not going crazy with this. I'm just making sure everything is evenly pushed in. When I scrape it off, I am looking for any low spots. I'm going to fill those in as needed. When I ram up my molds, I tend to do it on a board of some kind, mainly so I can just pick it up, hold it down, and get rid of all the excess. It makes cleaning just a little easier. But just a little. Now, I've got my two positives. But if you look on this one here, it's got a bit of sand over the edge. So I like to scrape just to make sure I have a nice flat parting line right here. We're going to bandsaw this whole thing and you know, clean everything up so it's not that big of a deal. But the less tear out I can get now, the better. Since I got everything off, more parting compound. Again, the parting compound just keeps things from sticking to other things. And in this case, I don't want the next layer of sand stick to the previous layer of sand. Since there's no real detail on this side, oh, it's rocking kind of weird, hold on. That's better. Since there's no real detail on this side, I'm not using facing sand. I'm just breaking everything up. Oh, there's a chunk of metal. And dumping it in. I could do these as an open face, which is just as it sounds. But I like the pressure, or I like the results that a little bit of pressure gives. It just makes things flow into open spaces a little better. All right. All right, here we go. Let's see how we did. That came out pretty good. This is the hardest part. Getting the positives out. But since we got this open, let's make some holes. I want a hole right here and a hole right here. So I'm gonna make a hole. This is just a 7-Eleven straw. They did Slurpee straws, the metal ones, a while ago. That's all this is. I did forget to put sand in here, though. And I'm going to be pouring 2 at once. So I'm just going to put a big hole right in the center here. Hopefully, that'll work. We'll find out. Now to carefully take our positives out. If you tap the edges, it tends to loosen up the bond a bit. I have found molds rarely work the first time out. So I'm probably going to end up making 2 or 3 of these. I'm expecting a lot of tear out on this one. Oh, almost none. Neat. A little bit on the end, but the symbol looks pretty good on that. Let me get you in there so you can see that. That turned out way better than I had any right to. I'll carefully put the top back on. I lost a chunk of sand there, but that's not that big of a deal. All right. I am a little worried about it floating. I have a brass and copper brownie that I am just going to put on the ends to weigh everything down. I have a concrete floor, so I'm in my garage. Even still, I'm going to flatten out this. You can't see this. To flatten out this bucket of sand and just carefully put the mold in here. Try and keep it as level as it can get. It's not critical, but you know, the better we start, the better it goes. Again, electric furnace. I just plug it and go. This thing is relatively old. It's a couple of years old. They've come out with much nicer ones since. I'm just using a small amount of zinc. So the zinc and the crucible, they're consumables. Which means they will eventually, you know, get used up. Since I am using a lower melting temperature furnace, that's not right. Hold that thought. I have the wrong temperature here. All right. Since zinc is such a low melting temperature metal, my crucible still looks brand new. If I were casting anything stronger in it, you're only supposed to use, I don't know, like 10, 15 times before you replace it. This thing's the original one. Again, zinc, which I get from pennies, by the way. 1994 and above pennies are mostly zinc, lightly copper coating. That alloy works really well with everything that I do. There's a bunch of different types of alloys you can get too, but I've currently got it set to 950. I believe that's F. I don't know. It's got to be F, because 950C is crazy. So it's 950F. Got one small thing of zinc in it. I've got my ingot, because there's going to be too much. And then I'm just going to pour everything that's left over into my my ingot mold, and we'll pick it back up when we're ready to pour. Now just wait. This is all fun and games, right? Molten metal. If you spill that on you, you're going to have a bad day. If you're pouring in some drips, you're going to have a bad day. Minimum face shield, gloves, and apron. Minimum. I would normally have a respirator if I was doing brass. The zinc's not going to get hot enough to worry about it. But if it splashes anywhere, I don't want to mess with it. I'm wearing shoes. I'm on concrete. Face shield, gloves, and apron. Preferably leather. If you don't have leather, wool works too. Wool is a fantastic fireproof material, or fire-resistant material, but it's porous. So if you're dealing with, again, molten metal, leather's probably a little better for it. So that pour went exceptionally well. We're going to give it 10-15 minutes to cool off. We'll crack it open and see what we get. This is the exciting part. Spade blade screwdriver and a pair of pliers. Let's see what we got. Well, that's a good sign. So at least I know it has flowed almost all the way through. Let me bring this to you so you can see this. This is pretty alright. See if we can get to zoom on this exceptionally shiny object. Look at that. And there's this one. That looks spectacular. So now I need to cut the sprues off, polish everything up, and attach them to the bag. Should be pretty easy. Let's find out. A metal cutting blade on my bandsaw. Make sure to keep my fingers away from the blade. Just like everything else we've done today. Bandsaws, super dangerous. I have my grinder buffer set up. Oh, these things. These are jeweler's clamps. They're wooden, they tend to have little leather pads, and they do a fantastic job of clamping on to small things and make them easy to use. Let's take this over to the grinder. So this is the hardware I want to use. They're small little silver Chicago screws. I have a drill bit that's just about the right size. Put that about where I want it so I can line up the center. I'm not going for exact, it doesn't have to be exact. And then the same thing on the bottom. I'm probably going to have to cut the screw for this. I am not going to hold this while I drill it. Like everything else, I'm just going to put it in the clamp. And then clamp it. I don't need to spin a thing in my hand. And make sure it fits. That's what I would call mostly. Widen out just a hair. I could probably get away with just one, but I'm going to do two. So I have this countersink bit that I'm going to use as a deburr tool. Much better. And fits perfect. And do the same thing to the other side. A little small. Perfect. Pouch still has a wood block in it. Just going to line it up as best I can. Drill a couple of holes. So I absolutely could have used a much larger icon, but I kind of really like how that looks. It's understated. If I wanted to add shadowing around the edges and a bit of weathering, it would still look just fantastic. So let's put everything together. Okay, that looks amazing. Zoom on that for a second. Oh my goodness, was that... I'm happy with that. That turned out fantastic. And that is also the last of this Jedi that I'm doing. It's packaged up, sent out to its new home. I'm exceptionally happy with how it turned out. I do stuff like this often, about once a week. If this is your thing, you think I've earned it, maybe, give me a thumbs up. If you like this kind of stuff, maybe think about subscribing. Sharing does an amazing amount for the channel, and I would really appreciate if you happen to share it. Other than that, thanks for making it to the end. I really appreciate that. I wanted to do an actual tutorial. Again, this stuff, pretty intimidating, and as long as you're careful, it's not very difficult. I'll leave links in the doobly for all the stuff I've used. At least the equivalent to most of it. But again, thanks for making it to the end. See you next time.